All right, we're back from reviewing, or back to review, I should say, the CW's number one show, All Americans, coming on before Stanford versus Colorado football. I'm Josh Neighbors, the host of Locked On Big 12. Spencer McLaughlin is the host of Locked On Pac-12. I will tell you this, and I've tried to do this with my coverage. I've tried to be as down the middle as possible, try to get all perspectives. We had Jim Williams on yesterday's show. I'm airing this on Tuesday. And, I think he shed some good light and spoke pretty positively for the Pac-12. We've spoken to you a decent amount as well. And, give us the vibe. How are Pac-12 fans feeling? Because I'll tell you what, the Twitter heat, the back and forth, as this deal gets closer, or
juice, isn't there?
A lot of juice. And a lot more people have entered the space talk. I've mentioned this now. There's a lot more people talking about realignment because I know the numbers that it does. Join the conversation. Not saying I was first, but I've been on this for like a year now, basically. Ever since Oregon, and you have to deal with it too. Ever since the US UCLA news, how do we feel now? Because there's a lot of noise, a lot of chatter. They get the Colorado thing today. Meeting Colorado. Nothing's happening today, folks, or at least yesterday. Nothing's happening. So how are we feeling?
I think for Pac-12 fans overall, and obviously you've got, a polarized fan at one end of the spectrum or the other. There are, a select few who are in panic mode. There are some who are, have no level of concern at all. I'm closer to that than panic mode, of course, but I'm not all the way in I have no concern about the deal, in terms of what it's going to end up being. But I think the timeline announcement, that we got from that Stuart Mandel tweet has almost served a purpose to kind of ease the waters for the Pac-12 and the fans and just kind of the media coverage overall, because when you were putting these soft deadlines out there, right, it's going to be April 15th. I think there was a president who put that out there, and we're hoping to have a deal by the end of March, or we're hoping to have it, in a couple of weeks. The deal's in its final stages, right? You created this kind of urgency and angst, and now when you just kind of kick it, not just down the road, but like over to the next neighborhood, right? Like 2 cul-de-sacs down. Now you've kind of put people in a space of, okay, we're not expecting anything right now. So I think the mood is just everybody's waiting and counting down the days until you get to sometime in the end of May, like a month from now. Today, when people are listening to or watching this show, thank you for doing that, by the way, it's April 18th. You tell me it's May 18th. I think the vibe is different. There's a greater sense of like, okay, what's it going to be? Who are the partners going to be? But because this has gone on for so long, like we've flushed out, or at least I feel like I have. I try to, attack it with new angles because I know it's what people are interested in, but I don't want to just repeat the same stuff over and over again. I know you feel the same way. And I think I've found, a number of different ways to attack it, but we're starting
ways to attack it. Which is crazy.
There are, but I think we are starting to reach the saturation point where it's like, every possible, outlet for the Pac-12 media deal, every possible angle, every possible broadcast partner, we kind of, I think, have, at least the everydayers out there, I think they've got a good idea and a good handle of like what the options are, and everyone's just kind of waiting. But because it's been pushed the timeline all the way out to end of May or June, I don't think there's the same sense of panic or frustration or urgency or, angst or anything like that, because they've just kind of said, okay, we're just going to, take our time here. And I want your thoughts on this, Josh. Do you think that, pushing it out to May or early June is a sign from the Pac-12 that they're trying to find not I think a different number with someone who we've, talked about repeatedly, ESPN, Apple, Amazon, the CW, whoever, but they could be looking to try and incorporate someone who we haven't even talked about, who no one is thinking about right now?
It's an interesting point. I once again, just speak with Jim Williams because he's inside the TV industry and, won 7 Emmys and knows kind of the space. He says, hey, somebody can be in one day, then out the next. But to me, if they're in one day, out the next, that's because there's an opportunity, right? There's maybe a bargain financially for them to get a certain something on there. And so all of a sudden, I guess things change. I don't think that's going to be the case. I would say that the best news is that if like May is kind of the deadline, and I think we kind of agreed May is probably where you want to be because that's when the Big Ten did their deal. You probably don't want to get much closer than a year, right? You don't want to be. It's like
so the Pac-12 deal.
Sports. How often in sports do you see somebody on like whether it be college coach, NBA coach, quarterback, whatever it is, on the last year of a contract rarely happens. It's not normally where you want to be. So I would guess that because of this, the kind of point being here is that they think there's potentially the framework for a deal. But to me, it's, they have not had it appears like there has not been anything that's like super formal. It feels like it's been presented to them that they're all, kind of near the goal line with. And I think Stuart Mandel even said so, hey, it's taking longer than they expected. So
right.
That's why they're holding on. Because to me, if I was them, I'd be like, man, how much more of this can we take? Right. Because it's just been so much insecurity. But to me, there must be some kind of framework there to maybe get something done. But I think George Kliavkoff's asked for enough time. I think he's got to deliver the goods here and do it soon.
Yeah, I agree. Like there has been, far more discussion of this than I thought there would be on your show or on my show. Cause I thought, at the very least, by the beginning of April, I would have thought, okay, we'll have a deal. We'll be talking about something tangible. We'll be talking about something concrete right now. And I think everyone loves to, rush to the opinion of, George Kliavkoff is awful, terrible, no good, very bad. He's the worst commissioner on planet Earth. And I on the one hand, I see how you reach that conclusion. But on the other hand, until I actually see what the deal is, I can't make, a big judgment one way or the other, right? Like so far, his most notable, policy, if you will, as a commissioner has been getting rid of divisions, which I think is great. And I think every conference should do that. And the Big 12 doesn't have divisions, and Big 10 needs to get rid of them. The SEC needs to get rid of them. Like they're really, really dumb. Right. But that's like the most tangible thing really that he's done today. And that's not, that's a nice change, but that's not, influencing my opinion of him one way or the other. This is the reason that you brought him in, right? You brought in someone who was the CEO of MGM Resorts, who's got a broadcast, background and all that sort of stuff. I don't need to dive into his career resume, but you brought him in to get the best possible deal in a situation like this, right? USC and UCLA leaving. I don't think there's anything in the world he could have done to prevent that. I think that had been built in for a long time. USC, orchestrated it in a way where they were shutting down the expansion idea, and then they came back to the table a year later and said, by the way, we're leaving for the Big Ten. Like, I really don't think George K could have done anything on that front, because commissioners, and when I was talking about this with Nate Dickinson of Locked On Big Ten yesterday, commissioners are working in conjunction with presidents and chancellors, but the presidents and chancellors are kind of the final decision makers, right? Like that collective group, if they decide to be more powerful and more decisive than the commissioner of the conference, they have the authority to overrule, because they're not going to vote to do anything that they don't want to do. They can't be forced into it. And I think, as we talked about yesterday, that's kind of why there was a fissure between Kevin Warren and the Big Ten, and why he was only there for 3 years. But on the timeline front here, yeah, he's been given more than enough time. Like the deal needs to be within.
He's been given sufficient.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And look, he's drawn this thing out, and at the end of the day, it may look like, what a lot of people have talked about before, which is there's no value, you can't get a good deal and it's just going to be terrible and all that sort of stuff. But if he comes around and he does get a good deal that people are happy with, then George K will look really smart for not having rushed to the table and just taking the first thing that he was able to get. And that's a calculated risk that he's clearly making. But I think on the timing front, you talk about the Big Ten deal having been negotiated 11 months in advance of when the current deal expires. For the Pac-12, that deadline would be June 1, because the next deal, or the current deal, expires technically July 1st. So the beginning of June is what the same timeline would kind of be. And I think that that's perfectly reasonable. But if you get to that point, like my concern level, it went up. It wasn't very high before. It went up when we didn't have a deal all throughout March. And then if you get to June and you push it back again, okay, then the concern level, at least for me, goes up another notch.
Today's show is brought to you all by the FanDuel Sportsbook. It is America's #1 sportsbook. You guys can make every moment matter more. It's easy to do. It's easy to sign up. You guys can go there now. New customers can set up with a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. FanDuel.com/lockedon to place your first bet. Once again, up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. You guys can do things like, bet on home run. They'll have a lot of fun home run props. I think there was Dinger Tuesdays, whatever they have.
Dinger Tuesdays.
Also, it is by far the best interface for any sports book. It's really not close in my opinion.
The easiest. Oh gosh, yeah, it's not close.
It's good. It's got logos for teams. It's got it's easy to get to the prop bets and everything. It's very, very user friendly. Payouts are basically immediate as well. So FanDuel Sportsbook, number one sportsbook in the country. Make every moment more. FanDuel.com/locked on. Yeah. So on the timing front of this, because I've gone back, like I've been like, man, the heat's on. I just think that, the heat is on because there's other options right now. I think for those schools side of things, if you're Colorado, if you're Arizona, like the option's not going anywhere. Right. But I think, part of me, and maybe I'm not sure this is true, but like, they had the first offer, kind of whatever it was, the Big 12 like offer that they had, kind of go. So, you're lucky it's there, but at some point you do have to make a decision. And to me, the issue is the reason why I think it's, the Big 12 makes sense is you had to deal with push back. And people in the industry I talked to and respect, folks like Adam Rittenberg said, yeah, if we're at the Pac-12 tournament and there's no deal, you can be, you can start worrying a little bit. And he said, if you're at the NCAA tournament ending and there's no deal, then you can definitely start to sweat it a bit. We're 2 weeks past that. I think the level of this is now crunch time, right? This is now the crunch time for this because you're about to end. We just had spring football, which is the final spring games of the last year. The football season basically has begun for the last year of the contract. That's when it's crunch time, and you have to deliver, and you have to deliver something substantial because there are options for some of these other schools. The big question to me, Spencer, and I think this is a part of it to me that's always been the most complicated, is that the wants, the needs, and the desires of Oregon and Washington, of Washington State, of Stanford, Cal, of the Four Corner schools, they are different. They all need different things. And you're an Oregon guy, and just we talked about that big gap. Like, how long, if you're Oregon and Washington, would you sign over your rights, knowing that you are a program that has been to a CFP, that's where you see yourself in a 12-team CFP? You can tell me if I'm wrong here, but Oregon fans, that's something they see themselves in. I mean, if 5 years, at least 3 of the 5 years, they think they should be in it.
Yeah.
Right.
And Washington fans are in that same boat, by the way.
They want to be there as well.
Right.
If the conference of the Pac-12 sent 2 teams, they see themselves as one of the 2 that should be there. So are you okay? How long would you be okay with signing over your rights if you know that something like the Big Ten joining a conference like that is possible, even at a reduced rate at some point?
I think, and Nate and I talked about yesterday about how the new commissioner, Tony Petitti, his impression is that he's not a guy who wants to come in, ruffle feathers and, cause a bunch of shakeups and whatnot. Like, expansion from the Big Ten is not coming in the near future unless it's Notre Dame. And if they went with Notre Dame, my theory, you can call me tinfoil hat guy or whatever, but if they added Notre Dame and they were looking for a school to pair with them, I think they would go to Stanford. I really do. I think that could make a lot of sense. I'm not saying.
I understand. No, I understand why.
I think the history with Notre Dame, the history with USC, the Big Ten, just kind of cultural and academic alignment there. And by the way, how quickly we forget what Stanford football once was. Now, this is a different era of college football and remains to be seen whether or not the Cardinal can compete at that level. But Cardinal have a non-zero endowment, shall we say, if they ever decided, okay, we would like to compete at football at a really high level again, and they decided to put more donor and booster money into, NIL collectives and that sort of thing. It's not as if Stanford would struggle to come up with the money.
Well, I mean, they're much like Notre Dame, right? The challenge, you only can recruit. I mean, that's why Brian Kelly left, is that you can only get a certain.
It is, but if you look at Notre Dame and say that's Stanford's ceiling, I've seen Stanford do that before. Like, I am old enough to remember. I actually remember. It's funny when you look at the history of Stanford football. I know Stanford as being great more than I know them as being terrible. Yeah. And that was not the way that it used to be. But so that's kind of the Big Ten thought. But I think for right now, the Big Ten is saying, no, we're fine. We're good. 16 teams, we're good here, unless we were to go for Notre Dame. But so for Oregon and Washington, I don't think, look, I'd say the absolute maximum total upper limit is 7 years. I think 5 or 6 is far more likely. I could see it being 5 or 6. I think that would just kind of depend on how the universities feel, all the details. And, I'm not privy to all that sort of information. But if you're Oregon or Washington, I think you have to think about what your priorities are, right? Like, Oregon is trying to, build up build a football team back to where they can get into a 14 playoff. But then Washington's trying to do the same. And both are, kind of on a good track to do that. But now you have a 12-team playoff coming in, right? And when I say think about the priorities university-wide, neither one of those schools are a basketball school. Like Oregon went to a Final Four with Dana Altman, and they would like to get back there, right? Like it has been a disappointing couple years not making the tournament. Like pressure's on Dana Altman going into potentially consecutive year number 3 of not making the big dance and whatnot. But both schools are prioritizing football first. Like that is their number one athletic responsibility as a school, or priority, I think is the better term. So when you look at a 12-team playoff, I wonder if they wouldn't be more likely to say, yeah, let's just stay in the pack, because our path to just getting into the playoff is a lot easier than if we were to one day go to the Big Ten. Now, are you operating at a financial disadvantage? Yes, you are. But you have to counter that with the notion of, okay, if we're in the Big Ten and we have the necessary amount of money, how are we getting into the playoff? Because you're going to have the 6 highest rated conference champions, right? Which we all assume is going to be 5 Power 5 and a G5 as well, right? So if you're not going to win the Big Ten, you're now actually going for 6 slots, which looks a lot more like the current format where you're going for 4 college football playoff spots.
Right. I would just say this is that Oregon's recruiting and Washington's too. Oregon's recruiting profile especially fits more in with like what Penn State and what Ohio State and what Michigan.
I agree.
Yeah, like so they, in terms of talent level, I mean, like sure they might lose sometimes, but more often than not, I think that's going to be a school you're going to see. They're automatically going to be a top tier team, right?
Sure.
You're not going to see a whole lot of Oregon sucking because they're better than most schools there.
Right. And that's kind of my point is you can stay in the pack and have a much easier path to a conference championship.
Right.
Whereas if you go to the Big Ten, your path to the conference championship is much more difficult. And then you're looking at the 6 at-large spots, and you can't control, what other people are doing, right? So you could have a 10-2 or an 11-1 or 11-2, whatever, non-champion Pac-12 team that may look better in the eyes of a committee than a 9-3 Big Ten team that has 3 losses in, the best conference in the country. But all that sort of stuff, you're just introducing a lot of unknown variables there. Whereas if you're Oregon or Washington and you're looking at, how you're going to get into the playoff, how are you going to win a national championship, right? Step 1, get into the playoff. And the better path to do that is unquestionably in the Pac-12. So if you look at that and say, okay, those 2 teams, Oregon and Washington, looks like they're going to be contenders, now and going forward, and they have been for quite a while. And then you say, well, what's the next step? Like who's that next rung below? Colorado? We don't know if Dion can coach at the Power 5 level yet. Like he's probably going to win games just by lieu of his recruiting because he does that at a very high level. But you don't know if he's able to build them into a conference championship caliber program. And even if he does, you don't know that that's going to last for more than a year. Oregon State just had a great year, but you don't know if they're able to sustain that. They never have as a program. And you just kind of keep going down the list and you say, if our priority is to win a national championship, and we got to get into the playoff to do that, the Pac-12 could still be the best slot there. And then they might look at it and say, well, maybe we just go to donors and boosters and, say that's where we'll try and make up some of the financial gap.
You do your best. Yeah. But I would say this is that, it's the same reason I think Utah wants, in a general sense, like the Big 12 is not as top heavy as the Pac-12 is, but where the Utah Utes currently finding their stride, it's in the Pac-12, right? And they've done it the last couple of years by beating USC, who's on the way back, and I know they're leaving, and they beat Oregon twice the previous year, right? And beat them pretty good. I think both those times, right? And so, well, generally speaking,
in 2021 they did, not in 2022. Just gotta throw that.
No, the year that the year they won the Pac-12, went to the Rose Bowl. And so if you're Utah, you're like, well, maybe like in a general sense, there's less Oregons of the world in the Big 12, but we're finding our stride, and it's actually been against. So the problem for them is not playing some of the schools in the conference, some of the schools out of the conference. Utah, kind of the start of the year for the Utes has been their issue. And so I think for them too, like that's why I think they feel pretty comfortable and probably don't want to leave the pack right now, especially with some of those, big dogs leaving. And so it kind of makes it interesting for them as well. That's why we've had so much conversation about like, well, who would leave? Who'd be the first ones to leave? And, Arizona State felt like this natural pairing because they are both in-state rivals. Now we got to the point where it feels like Colorado and Arizona are kind of the more natural ones. I think location, obviously, for Arizona.
I don't know that Colorado would jump back.
I think they would. Yeah. I think they've been pretty. I think it makes. They've already been. Well, but like it's not like this bridge too far, is what I'm saying. Yeah, jumping back would be weird, but I mean, if the situation necessitated it, they would, right? The Big 12 would welcome them back to.
Yeah, I mean,
the game's changed. It's not like it's the same thing.
If the Big 10, which has the power, I think, to destroy the Pac more than anything else in the country or any other conference, if the Big 10, let's say they did come calling one day for Oregon, Washington, Stanford, Cal, and then the Pac-12 began to fall. Yeah, you'd be left with the Big 12 because there wouldn't be another option at that point. But I think that's the only way that anybody sees it. Because if you'd wanted to go, like if there was really a big desire amongst any of Utah, Colorado, Arizona State to go, like if they really, really wanted to, they've had the last 6 months to do so.
That question's outdated. The question is not, it's not the Big 12 versus the Pac-12 right now. It's really the Pac-12 versus itself, right? It is about finding the right television deal that makes the members happy. The Big 12 is just the outlet if they're not happy enough. They've all made it clear at this point, we all would like to remain together. Nobody's like, this great Big 12 option. This is exactly where we want to be. No, right. It's a great secondary option. It's a safe option. But these schools have made it incredibly clear that they're going to give George Kliavkoff the opportunity to make them that offer. And that's the thing is, I think that they've been so fair to him. There's like, they're going to have to make us say yes. You got to come to us and make us say yes. And we're giving you time. We might even take less money. Some of us could have said, we're out the door unless it's now, and it's not now. Okay. No, we're going to give you the chance to do it. And he's had the opportunity. He has not done it yet. And if he doesn't, he doesn't make good. I mean, President Roberts was pretty open about it. Robert Roberts was pretty honest. I do every single time. Was very honest about it. He said, look, the Big 12 is there for us. That is an option, but George is going to have the chance. So I think look, could the Big 10 deliver the kill shot? Sure. The SEC could deliver the kill shot if they wanted to. Oregon and Washington.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the Big 10 is just more realistic because, the SEC.
No, but the Big 12, but no, I disagree with that because you just said that they're not going to expand right now.
No, I know.
Oregon and Washington, maybe.
I'm saying I think it's more likely that the next realignment move that comes hunting for Pac-12 teams is from the Big 10 than the SEC. I just don't think that's going to be very soon. I'm talking like next round.
Do you think Big 10's more likely than the Big 12 is?
No. Sorry, I said Big 10's more likely than the SEC.
Oh, the SEC. Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah,
but I also think the Big 10 is more likely than the Big 12, right?
I'm not sure how you could say that though. When the Big 12 is standing offers for schools who have said that one school's president said we would join.
Well, he didn't say that. He didn't say they would join.
No, he essentially said he's like he danced
around the bush.
No, he said that we have another option there. Let's see, President. To find the thing.
Right, but here's the reason.
How is that not more likely?
Because I know that Oregon and Washington would say yes if presented with an offer, regardless of what the Pac-12 does. The Big 12 offer, quote unquote, to all these schools has been out there for quite some time, and it's not something that they want to do. But Oregon, Washington, maybe even Stanford,
want to go
to the Big 10.
It's crunch time now. So like the decision will come.
But I guess the point I'm making is I think it would be a more immediate, ready-made, like, yes, this is going to happen. Whereas the Big 12 is like, yeah, we might, it's like, it's been there for a while. They've had the chance to go. They've had the chance to do that. And they've said, no, we want to be here. But you wouldn't have that if the Big 10 came calling. If the Big 10 came calling, Oregon and Washington are gone tomorrow.
Well, that's what, yes. From a standpoint of.
Right. And but that's the point I'm making is the Big 12
offer is the Big 10.
The Big 12 has come calling, and the Pac-12, a couple Pac-12 schools have been like, probably not, but just like stay there.
The decision's about to be made. And as I said, it's not just like, it's Big 12 or Pac-12. Like, we have to make a decision now because this Big 12 thing might go, no, the Big 12 it's going to be there for them coming up here because the Big 12 has aspirations and now they're secure of moving west. That decision is going to have to be made. That is. But that's why I'm saying it's not Big 12 versus Pac-12. It's Pac-12 versus, what is everybody okay with?
Yeah, the other thing too, and why I don't rule out the Big Ten option is not just that I think the West Coast schools would say yes, but I wonder as well if the Big Ten presidents and chancellors aren't looking at this realignment move with USC and UCLA and saying, okay, let's kind of try this out, right? We don't want to expand further right now because we want to iron out all the kinks first. We want to flush out all the details. We want to get the logistics right. We want to figure out how we make this the best possible situation, and then determine what our needs are at a later time, and then determine if they wanted to go shopping in the Pac-12 again. That's why I don't rule out the Big Ten option. I think in the short term, I do, because of the new commissioner they brought in, the message that we've been getting there. But I think once things settle down again, once USC and UCLA get established in the Big Ten, I think it'll be natural for them to say, well, why don't we go further west? There are valuable football brands out there. I know Stanford's way down, but at their peak, they're really good, and they're in the Bay Area. That's a valuable media market. Same thing with Cal. Oregon and Washington are hot programs at the moment, and they're big media draws, relative to their market size at the moment, right here, right now. So I think they're more in a wait and see. Whereas, they just have to extend the offer, right? Like that's my point in the Big Ten versus the Big 12. It's like the Big Ten just has to say, all right, do you want to come over here? And I think, 90+% they would say the Pac-12 schools would say yes. Whereas the Big 12 schools have made the offer and they've said, give me a sec. And there would be none of that with the Big Ten, with the Big Ten. That's where I stand on it.
Yeah, look, and here's a quote. He said, "I know." So this is what he said: "I know what the Big 12's number is. I just need to hear what the Pac-12's number is." And he said about the Texas schools, he said Lubbock's not very far away. The other Texas schools are a quick flight, as he said about Oklahoma State as well. And so, as much as they can say, like, I don't see it for a couple $1 million, I don't see people leaving. No, I don't think so either. I think that's why they're still here, because it's like there is a number that makes sense for them, even if it's a little bit less. They were pretty adamant they might get more.
Right.
Look, I don't think that's the case. And look, I started off as saying I think they get a deal done. After some news, I felt like I went to about 50-50, kind of back towards I think they're going to get a deal done at this point in time. I think we're back towards that. But
yeah, I expect them to.
It's the fact that we don't have a deal yet. We're about to figure out next month.
That's why I asked you the question earlier of like, what about the possibility that they're either bringing someone back to the table who was previously reported to be out, or right, because Jim said people come into the table, out of the table all the time with that sort of stuff,
very quickly,
or are they going to someone who we haven't heard from, we haven't heard about, we haven't even thought about or whatnot? Like, all the reports about the CW before it came out that they were going to potentially do that, and we started making jokes about Riverdale and Family Guy and all that sort of stuff. Had you mentioned the CW before? Because I had not. I talked about ESPN, maybe Fox, Apple, and Amazon, but then that came into play. So that's why I think the extended timeline is kind of intriguing, because it leaves open the possibility, like it gives you enough time to basically go and start from scratch with somebody, to start brand new negotiations on, bidding for rights and, which games you'd be able to get and all that sort of stuff. And I do think there's a layer of complexity here. If you're going to have 3 people involved, at least 3 media entities involved, one of which would be a non-traditional, broadcast partner in Apple and or Amazon. I think, who gets which games and how do you decide that sort of stuff? I think that could be, advantageous for the Pac-12 or a reason maybe why they extended this out to, May or early June, because they're saying we need time to talk this stuff through, because it's brand new. Like if you're doing something for the very first time, it's going to take a lot longer than when you're doing it for the 10th time.
Right. The reason why I don't think there's new folks involved, it could be possible. That would be dependent on there being a lot of faith in the presidents, right? I mean, unless that they know something, unless they've been told something different, that's a lot of faith in the presidents to be like, we're going to basically try to start from scratch with 1 month to go, 1 month till May, 1 month.
Well, you mean the president's putting faith in George?
Yeah, it'd be a lot of faith to be like, all right, well, let's just start from scratch again. That's just the part I have a difficult time with. All right. Spencer, where can people find you and your work and all of its variety? We're up to.
I'm on Twitter at Smalls_55 and Locked On at Pac-12, which many of you are listening this to or watching right now on YouTube. It's on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, Monday through Friday. And it's always a pleasure to come on here and chat about the ever-evolving world of conference realignment. Josh, feels like we should just get used to talking about this every day for the next 5 years.
It's always changing. You guys can find me at @JoshNeighbors_. Find the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're at LO Big 12 on Twitter. and find us on YouTube as well. And you all should listen to these podcasts together. Honestly, I think they'd probably be pretty good partner podcasts to listen to just to get both perspectives. So Spencer, it's a pleasure. We'll talk again soon.
Yes, indeed we shall.